Welcome to the Relationship Series podcast. My name is Ankush Jain, and each episode I'll be speaking to a different state of mind expert on the subject of relationships. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 37 of the Relationship Series. This week, I'm pleased to be joined by Michael Neill. Michael Neill is a transformative coach. He is a best-selling author of several books. He's a public speaker, and he's got his own internet radio show. So, welcome, Michael. Michael is someone who I got introduced to several years ago. Michael has no idea what I'm about to say, but I actually got introduced to you by my very first coach when you'd written the book, You Can Have What You Want. And he told me, there's a great coach in America called Michael Neill. And I bought your book and I've got to admit, I read half it and I thought, this is really interesting stuff. And then I forgot about you. And then it was several years later when I decided to get into coaching that I kind of rediscovered you and the work that you do. And I know we've very briefly met a couple of times. And your book, The Inside Out Revolution, which I've got with me, is, I just think, a fantastic personal story about your transformation. And I think the way that you share what it is that you do is so personable. And I'm just really glad to have you on the show. For those of you, those people who are listening to this who don't know who you are, who've got no idea who I'm interviewing, could you just give us a very brief kind of background in terms of who you are? And I'm introducing you as a state of mind expert. So how that came about?
Well, it came about because you decided to call me that. But I think for me, I started out as an actor and a depressive, suicidal teenager. So that was sort of how I got into all this. And it started out as me kind of hating the therapeutic approach that people were using on me to try and make me well, both because it didn't work, but also because it just, I don't know, I felt like a lump of brain meat. It didn't feel like it had anything to do with me. It was just, right, well, this is what's wrong and we're going to fix it. And so I kind of was drawn towards spirituality. I was drawn towards Eastern religion, particularly Zen and Buddhism and books like the Bhagavad Gita and the Dharmapada and the Tao. And that helped a little. And then I sort of fell from that into more alternative psychologies. And the one that initially opened me up to a wider world was NLP. And so I was reading a Tony Robbins book, and somewhere in there he talked about turning down the volume on the voice in your head. And I was like, I didn't know there was a knob. This is fantastic. And I did it, and I experienced peace of mind. Like, it got quiet, and it was never quiet in my head. And I look back on that now and think, if somebody had told me back in the late 80s that was actually my natural state, that quiet is the space within which our experience emerges, that sort of sense of peace is what's there when we're not getting all caught up in our thinking, I think my journey would have been completely different. But instead, what I was told to explain it was, you've just begun to tap the power of the mind and you can learn to control everything. And so that's what I did for the next 15 years is I learned to control everything for myself, for others. And there were some very helpful things about that. It definitely got me kind of through some things. But there was something that fundamentally nagged at me, and it was that we weren't the happiest people in the room. And I kind of thought, if what we're doing is as powerful as we say it is, and there was no question, nothing was fake. I mean, people would come in with phobias, they'd leave without phobias. They'd come in blushing, they'd leave not having to blush. They'd come in with a problem, they'd leave without it. And yet, those of us at the top of that profession were not the happiest people I knew. And I thought, okay, so this isn't what I really want. And so while I wasn't looking for anything in particular, I'd already had a couple books out. The book you mentioned, You Can Have What You Want. My second book, Feel Happy Now, which was really about coping with depression and anxiety. And then I came across this book that probably other people have mentioned on the show, and I know you've interviewed George Pransky, the author, called The Relationship Handbook. And at the time that I read it, Nina and I, my wife and I have been together. This is our 28th year together, 26th year of marriage, something like that. Where like this interview is about a month before our 26th wedding anniversary. And we had for years what I used to call our annual fight. And it wasn't about the same thing every year, but once a year we get into it about something. And so this was 2007, and what it was about that year, it was September, and it was, she wanted to move house and I wanted to not be broke, was the way I had it in my head. Her description would not be the same. And I was complaining to my coach, Steve Chandler, who I know you know as well, and kind of just being a guy. And he, in a fit of just, I think, frustration, because I wasn't listening to him, said, "Oh, just read this book." And I'm like, "Oh God." And I hate relationship books. I do. I think most relationship books I've ever read, I love books. I've read thousands of books. And almost every relationship book I ever read, I thought might work for the author. Like it's such a specialized, and you do this, and you communicate like this, and you say this. And I'm like, man, if I start even showing up doing any of that, my wife's out of there. Like if I start working on her or anything like that. So I had a bias. I did not come to the conversation clean. And much to my surprise, that wasn't my experience of the Relationship Handbook at all. I remember the first thing that I remember from it was it said, like somewhere in chapter 2, I think, that the purpose of a relationship was to enjoy each other's company. Now, I don't know if that sounds obvious to you, but that had never even occurred to me. Like, I thought the purpose of a relationship was to learn together, to grow together, to raise children together, to start a family, to bring two families together, to survive. Like, I don't know what I thought. You know, I mean, I'm sure I thought a lot of different things at different times. It had never dawned on me that enjoying each other's company was legit. Because we did. I mean, obviously we did. That's why we got together. We were best friends before we were, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend before we were married. And somehow that just took all the pressure off. Just going, oh, well, if that's the point. Now, I didn't know what had happened. I had an insight, but not like an insight that I could have told you what it was. I just know that when I got back on the phone with Steve, I think he gave me the book on a Monday, and I think I got back on the phone with him on a Friday. And he said, "How's it going?" And I said, "Great." And he said, "No, how's it going with Nina?" And I said, "Great." And he said, "Well, what about the fight?" And I said, "What fight?" And I literally could not remember that we were in the middle of our annual fight. It had changed that quickly, that instantaneously, and for both of us, even though I didn't even talk to her about the book. And so I think some sort of cool voodoo, black magic, white magic, I don't know what kind of magic, but I'm like, ooh, new toys. And so I start looking to find out more about state of mind and about the stuff that George Pransky was into. And I found that there was this whole field of psychology I'd never come across, which I ran the biggest psychology bookshop in London and one of the biggest New Age bookshops in London. So for me not to even know a field existed was kind of a big deal. And I thought, where have they been hiding? And there wasn't a lot. You know, you go online now, you look up state of mind, you look up 3 principles, you look up these things, and there's thousands of entries. There was nothing. I found like 3 websites, I think, Jack Pransky, George Pransky, and the Vermont one was Jack Pransky. I mean, like there was nothing. And so I started just making phone calls. Actually, it's the last time I remember using a phone book, because I had to get a phone book to look up, because they weren't. And I just talked to anybody who would talk to me, because I thought they had a secret formula that could give me amnesia for my biggest problem. And I wanted the secret formula for my work. And I talked to a number of people I know you've had on this series. I talked to George, I talked to Keith Blevins, And Keith was the one who convinced me to come up and have a conversation. And I tried to get him to come down. I was really busy. I had all my great reasons. And Keith was kindly persistent and said, just come up, take some days off, and let's talk. And so I talked to my business partner, and he was like, well, yeah, this is good, because you go up there, you can find out what they do, and maybe they don't really know what they do, so you can teach it to them, and then they'll appreciate it. We can come back and teach it to our people. And, so I was on this noble mission, to help these poor psychologists who didn't really know what they knew. Sounds a little bit arrogant, probably was a little bit arrogant, but that's what it was like for me. I was like, okay, let's go sort these guys out. And I went up, and the first thing I noticed was Keith talked slower than any human being I had ever spent time with. Now, he's actually sped up. I don't know how you find his pace, but he has genuinely sped up. His wife told me. But it was so disconcerting to me in my NLP, go get 'em tiger kind of way of being in the world, that I thought, okay, have I joined a cult? I actually said to him at one point, do you have to be on Quaaludes to do this work? Because I did not understand what was going on. And in fact, my wife, he asked for permission to phone Nina and kind of interview her about me to get more background on me from her point of view. And she phoned me and she said, Mikey, are you okay? The strangest man just phoned. He talked so slowly. Right? So we don't know what's going on, but I figured I'm here. So I showed up, I listened. By the end of the second day, I was like, I don't think anything's going to happen here, but okay. So I'm in my hotel room. I'm suddenly realizing, did you want this story? Because I'm really quite far into it. This is the story. All right. So I'm in my hotel room and I'm watching this video, this guy, Sid Banks, who they'd been talking about, who was this Scottish welder who had an enlightenment experience. And I thought that was cool. I like enlightenment literature. I got to meet Byron Katie and a few other people who were meant to be enlightened. So I was that didn't freak me out. And he was talking and he said, every human being is sitting in the middle of mental health. They just don't know it. Now, I was halfway through my second beer, waiting to get through the video, which I'd promised Keith I would watch so I could get back to the ball game. It was Giants-Mariners. And somehow I got that was true. That we human beings were born happy, that our nature is well-being. And the beer came out of my nose. I laughed for about 10 minutes because I was about to go on a book tour promoting my second book, which was about how to create well-being, as if it didn't exist, as if it wasn't your natural state, about how to move on a continuum from, unwellness, dis-ease, to wellness and ease by using mental manipulation. And I suddenly I've got this whole thing wrong. It's not left to right, it's up and down. And home is well-being. And we just get caught up in our thinking and taken away from it. And the second that thinking fades, we're right back to ourselves. We're right back to our well-being. And I got it so strong, so clearly, that it really messed me up, because I built my entire career and was about to go on a book tour talking about something that I now knew wasn't true. And so then when I kind of went in on the third morning to Keith and was like, okay, you're right, I'm wrong. Teach me. And he did. And I went home and my business partner couldn't wait to, we met for lunch. He was like, okay, what's the secret formula? And I was like, I am so sorry, dude. I drank the Kool-Aid. This is just true. We are born happy. We are naturally well. And all this other noise is just a distraction from that. And the implications of that have been unfolding in my life for the last 9 years now. The Inside Out Revolution was actually my third attempt at articulating it. My first attempt was Supercoach, which a lot of people love as a book. And it was kind of a halfway. It was sort of me trying to marry what I used to do and this kind of state of mind understanding that I'd evolved. My second book was called It's Not Too Late, A Story of Hope for Your Marriage. And it was what they call wisdom fiction. And it was my first attempt at articulating it clean. And my wife actually asked me not to publish it because she felt it was too personal, and I got it. Like, to me, that made sense. And so I put it away. And then my third attempt was The Inside Out Revolution, which has gone on to, I think we're in 16 languages and go all over the world. And then my new book, The Space Within, comes out like in 3 weeks. And I'm very excited about that. So that's how I got here.
I've heard that story before, and even when I hear it again, it's so engaging, because what I love about the way you share, Michael, is it's just so raw and so honest. And, what you said was that you were at the forefront of this field previously, but you found that people at the top of the field just weren't very happy. I get a real sense that that's very different now.
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved, and I don't want to cover everyone with that same blanket. I'm not saying there were no happy people in the field. I'm just saying that it seemed to me that given what we were teaching, we should be freaking off the charts. And we weren't. We were like everybody else. We had good days and bad days. Sometimes we were awesome. Sometimes we sucked. And it was like, that wasn't what we were teaching, though. And what I've found is, whereas I would say the difference, and I actually had a client who did this. I had a client, she was an investment banker, and she worked with me before and after. And she said, the difference is, when I worked with you before, I learned to be a high-functioning, stressed-out executive. I learned to cope with and manage my stress and anxiety levels brilliantly. And she said, now I'm just happy. Now I'm just effective. Now I just love my job. And I have good days and bad days. But that's the same for me. Like, once I gave up on the whole control model and realized, you don't have to control. Look, if the default is well-being and clarity and peace of mind and insight and creativity and flow, well, there's not a lot of point in doing a lot in your head, right? If that's where you're going to go back to when you shut up, you may as well shut up now and let this kind of deeper wisdom, deeper insight, deeper feeling come up in you. And that's what I just kind of saw for myself and continue to see for myself. And one of the things I love about this conversation is I think I've had the same insights 15 to 30 times. And I expect if I live long enough, I'll have them another 30 to 50 times. Like, there's really only a relatively few number of things you see about the mind, because you just see the truth of how it works. And then you just see it again at a deeper level and again at a deeper level. And I joked with my publisher that, I've got the space, we did Inside Out Revolution. I've got The Space Within coming out. And then next year I'm doing a book called Creating the Impossible, which is a trilogy that are really 3 different ways of coming at state of mind. And I joked with them that really, if I write any more books, they all need to be called No, Really. Because I'm not saying anything different. I'm just finding different ways of saying it. Because it's just true. This is how it works. And once you see it, it's endless in its implications. But it's just how it works.
So I'm kind of curious. Do you still have your annual fight, or is that evaporated? And how's your relationship now?
Do you know? No, we haven't had the annual fight since then. We do still bump. I mean, we bumped just before I came down here, for 37 seconds. Because she's going on a trip, and she could see that when she talked about it, she could see the fear in my eyes, and said, "Oh, you're worrying about the money." And I was like, "Yeah." And then that was done. Like, in other words, we're still human beings coexisting with separate realities that bump into each other from time to time. But whereas in the past, that might have felt like a fundamental problem. That might have felt like a symptom, because in a way, right, that's what we were having our annual fight about in 2007. The difference being that neither of us is going to remember that when this interview is over. It doesn't feel significant. It doesn't feel like, oh my God, yeah, that's a problem. How are you going to resolve that? Which one of you is going to concede? Which one of you is going to have to compromise? Who's going to win? Like, all of that crap is just not there. And so, we've been through more than we ever thought we'd be through, have to go through. We've shared amazing things and horrible things. We're closer than we've ever been. We're more compatible by a mile than we were 28 years ago. Like 28 years ago, I wouldn't have bet on us. Now I would bet on us. That might not sound impressive after 28 years, but it's like we make sense in a way we didn't make sense at all when we were kids. This is actually, I'm drinking. I didn't do this on purpose, but I don't know if you can read this.
We're recording audio only, so I will explain that Michael's holding up a mug with some writing on it, and it says, "You are the luckiest guy in the world. I would love to be married to me."
Yes, there's a little gift from my wife, and she's right. I do. I really. It all sounds cliche, but I am married to my best friend. And that's a really cool deal.
What's so funny is that, and I know a lot of people who share this and people I've had on the show talk about this in a very ordinary way. And I'm getting that feeling from you. And at the same time, what occurs to me is that and this is just my experience, but I don't seem to see that a lot. So when I tend to look around, and I tend to look at people that are married in my everyday life, it seems to be that the guys are complaining about their wives and the wives are complaining about their husbands. And when I tend to talk to people who have who do this for a profession, who are state of mind experts, they seem to be married for decades and talk about what you talk about, how they're more compatible, that they're more in love, that they feel closer than they've ever done before. And whilst it's very ordinary, it seems to me it's also seems to be quite unusual in today's society.
Yeah, when Nina and I talk about it, and we don't talk about it a lot, right? We do not work on our relationship. And not because there's never bumps, but because that just is a weird, I don't know, that doesn't even make sense to me as a model. But things that we say in those few times where we do talk about it is, we're really lucky. Like, I don't know if that's true or not, but we feel lucky. Like I said, if you look back on who we were when we got together, I don't know that this was the no-brainer way things would have turned out. There is an element of wanting it to work. Like, we want to be married. We like being married. So when things get icky, the first place we go isn't away. Like, that's not what we want. So that's not where we go. And so consequently, when we do get sort of our thinking clears, we calm down, we settle down, we come back, we always come back to home, which is two people who are well in and of themselves, who enjoy each other's company, hanging out. And when you get two people who like each other and hang out a lot, you build a life together, and it's an awesome life. And it's full, and it's like everyone's life. People you love die. People you love get sick. People you love have problems. And that's part of it. And like, I look back, I was such a blind optimist in my 20s that I didn't understand why people would break up as they got older. Like, they're not trying hard enough or stuff like that. Well, no, I didn't know. You go through stuff. Life happens. It happens to you separately. It happens to you together. You have kids. There's money stuff. Like, there's a bunch of stuff. I get why couples break up. But by the same token, when you start to understand that you're experiencing your state of mind, you're not experiencing your partner. You're not upset because they did this, that, or the other. You're upset because you're upset. And that passes. And that would happen regardless of your circumstances. And you can always get back to love, because when you're not up in your head, when you're not up in your thinking, you're in love. And when you're in love together, that usually goes pretty well. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, I get that it might not be the norm, but I agree with you that it's very ordinary. And I don't necessarily want to take credit for it. Like, I feel very lucky, but by the same token, I get how my understanding of state of mind has helped tremendously along the way.
Yeah, I can totally relate to the feeling lucky and feeling like I stumbled across something that was just very helpful. Um, does did you introduce your wife? Did you introduce Nina to this? Have you tried to teach her anything? How's your relationship
Oh,
been with
I'm
that?
not that much of an idiot. No, I actually almost have gone too far the other way and avoided trying to introduce Nina to it in any way. She read Inside Out Revolution, which she really liked, and she just read The Space Within, which she loved. And of course, because my kids have gotten into it, two of my kids have gotten very into it, she's kind of picked up from them and from me. And I've realized that I'm the one holding back from sharing with her sometimes. So we do talk about it sometimes, but not a lot. What she's picked up, I think, is just on the feeling of it, because she's naturally inclined towards love. She's naturally inclined towards connection in a way that I wasn't. I was kind of, I don't think I'm on the spectrum, but you wouldn't have known it to have met me as a kid, right? You know, we were very smart in my family, and we did smart things, and emotions happened. But if you moved on quickly, you didn't have to notice, and you certainly wouldn't talk about it. So like, I've come a long way. And I think for me, it was probably a much longer journey than it's been for her. Where I think it helps her is that I think she does see that just because you think something and feel something in the moment, it doesn't mean it's significant. There's a lot less, oh my God, this is an irreconcilable difference kind of thing. And a lot more of, oh, just go away for 10 minutes. And so consequently, it's like shock absorbers. Like, I don't know if the road is any less bumpy, but it feels a lot less bumpy for both of us. And I don't want to make it sound, I mean, I'm not sure how it sounds like. I'm not sure if I'm making it sound like we fight all the time. We definitely don't. We actually get on incredibly well. But I'm like sort of super careful that people don't think, we are Zen masters who go through life and go, are you happy, dearest? Yes, I am happy, dearest. I am happy too, dearest. Let us go. It's no, we're people, But that's also the fun of it, is that we're people.
If someone's listening to this and they're having some issues in their relationship, and they're thinking, okay, well that's great for you, Michael. You sound like you've got a wonderful wife, and would you say to them that really it is always about looking at yourself and changing yourself, or what advice would you give someone?
So it's a good question, and I'm sure the answer would be different in a way for each person that asks, because that's how it works, is what occurs to you. But in the abstract, I think what I would say is, first off, don't give up yet. Like, don't assume that you know what the problem is, because we're almost always wrong. We're terrible at self-diagnosing. Like we're terrible at thinking we know what the problem is. And society doesn't help, right? Because if you go on and Google it, you'll find the 7 things your partner does wrong, the 4 things you need to do, and somebody winds up looking bad, either you or your partner, right? Actually, life isn't anybody's fault. If you don't understand where your feelings are coming from, it's really natural to make stuff up. And one of the obvious places to make it up is it must be coming from this other person, because I wasn't feeling this way before they came along. And that works both ways. So clearly the love was only down to them. And that's why I'm desperately clinging to this crappy relationship just in case that comes back. But clearly this misery is also from them. And that's the debate. So the debate is, do I put up with the misery to get the love? And when you see, no, the love is our natural state and it's amplified in relationship. When I'm in love and you're in love and we're together, we're in love together. And that's a stronger feeling, a deeper feeling than we can have on our own. And when I'm upset, if I know that upset is a function of my own thought in the moment, I'm feeling my thinking, and you know that yours is the same, we're just that much less likely to put it on the other person and try and get them to change so we can feel better. And so it's not work on yourself, and it's not work on the relationship, and it's certainly not work on your partner. It's if you can see what's actually going on at a deeper level, that you, this incredible being of love and light and divinity and spirit, are getting caught up in your own thinking and your own little separate reality, and it's driving you crazy. And because you're looking at your partner while you're doing that, it looks like they're doing it to you. It's just easier to navigate and to know, hey, you know what? I'm not going to be upset in an hour, or at least I might not be upset in an hour. So I tell this story sometimes, and I've once actually had somebody get very upset with me about this story. But this was significant for me in my understanding of it in my relationship. So when I started to see that we really, it's all thought, and that thought is so fluid. Like, I don't know what I'm going to be thinking in 5 minutes. So why do I think I know what our relationship is going to look like in 5 minutes? And I remember Nina and I came home from somewhere, and it was tea time, which is sacred in my house. And Nina thought that I was going to get the milk, and I thought that she was going to get the milk. So we had a fight about the milk. And I was like, oh. And I went out righteously to go get the milk. And something happened that had never happened before. I remember as I got in the car, the thought occurred to me, I wonder if I'm still going to be upset by the time I get back with the milk. Now that was brand new. Like I'd never had that kind of thought before. And then as I'm driving, I'm thinking, well, it doesn't necessarily make sense that I would be, because thought's fluid. And if I'd let go of the thinking I've got now, I don't know what's going to replace it, but it's not necessarily going to be the same thing. And then I got like genuinely kind of interested. Like, I wonder what I'll be thinking when I come home with the milk. And then I'm shopping in the supermarket and I'm thinking, well, wait, I wonder if Nina's still going to be upset when I get back. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, of course she's going to be upset. But then I'm thinking, well, no, I mean, like, because she might not be thinking what she was thinking when I left. And so I'm literally driving home with the milk thinking, I wonder what we're going to be thinking and feeling when we next see each other in 3 minutes. And I walk in, and it was so sweet. She came right over to me and she gave me a hug and she said, I'm really sorry. I don't even remember what she said. But and what was fascinating to me was not that she had had a change of heart, but that I had. Because I know that if I hadn't seen, oh, I'm just up in my head and thinking this is something to do with her, even if she'd come over to me and given me a hug and apologized, I would have, whether I said it or not, gone, oh, you're not getting off that easy. Right? I would like put my barriers up and kind of, it was so fascinating to see, oh, I don't have to do that. A change of heart can happen in a moment, and it can happen for either of you or both of you. And so you don't have to worry about it in the way that I used to worry about it. It's not, oh my God, we have fundamental irreconcilable problems. It's, oh my God, we're both really caught up right now. I hope one of us wakes up soon.
People thankfully can't see my face, but I'm grinning because I can so recognize myself in that story as well, and I'm sure many other people can too. I want to just change the question a little bit, go in a slightly different direction, if we may. And that is one of romance. And what I find in certain conversations is that there seems to be, and I know I used to think like this as well, there seems to be a thought or a feeling about, well, either there's the one person for us, or if people say there's not the one, there's certain people that make us feel more in love or special, or there's something about the other person. That's the whole purpose of relationships. Some people think. I used to think this. And I know that when I've talked about this before and I've said, well, no, I can't experience another person directly. I can only experience my thinking about them. Some people would say, well, that takes the romance out of it. And I'm just kind of wondering what I've got a view on it, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are around that.
Okay, here's where I'm going to kind of get off my base. And what I mean is, like, I have an opinion, but I think it's just an opinion. Like, I don't think, like, up till now, I think I've been telling you things that are true. This might be crap. Okay, so just want to preface it that way. First off, with the romance thing, that's just overthinking it. It's like people often do that. They go, well, if our feelings are coming from our thinking, then why would it matter what we feel? And why would we ever change anything? And why would we just spend all our time on the porch? It's like, because it doesn't work that way. I can't tell you why, but it doesn't work that way, right? That's some sort of nightmare doomsday scenario that everyone seems to go to. And it's like, what can I tell you? I've never seen it happen. So that's the first bit. I think there are a couple of different things that go on in that cause us to wind up with who we wind up with. One of them is pheromones. I kind of believe in pheromones. I don't even know if they're real. Like, I've not done any scientific research into this, but some people just smell better to me than others. I mean, not literally, probably literally, but you know what I mean? It's like, I do think there is some biology involved. Okay. Now, is the biology in charge? No, but there's biology involved, right? I think the second thing is circumstance, right? I think if you'd grown up in a different town, you probably would have fallen in love with a different woman. I think that's true. Now, that's not necessarily not romantic, because who's to say that it wasn't ordained that you would grow up in the town that you grew up with so that you could fall in love with the person that you fell in love with. So even that, to me, doesn't eschew romance. It's just a different way of seeing it. Like, Nina and I were made for each other. Might someone else have been made for me? I don't know. I can't say definitively no, but boy, were we made for each other. And so was that design? Was that God? Was that preordained? No idea. But sometimes it pleases me to think that. And then I guess the final bit would be, even romance is a state of mind. Like, it's something that you bring to the relationship, not something that you find in it. And so, you can bring romance to anything, and sometimes it will be appreciated and sometimes it will be laughed at. I mean, romance is by definition somewhat stupid, but it's kind of lovely too. So that would be my 3-part take.
Thanks, Michael. No, that's again, you've got me reflecting, and I so feel the same. That we were talking before we started being interviewed, and you asked me what was some of the insights I've had from doing this series, and I talked about compatibility, and the interview with Joe Bailey around, compatibility is overrated really hit me. But as you were talking, I'm thinking about my fiance, and I'm thinking, God, we're made for each other. Some of the stupid little nuances and the way we connect, it is so us. And there's that kind of weird thing around knowing that my feelings aren't coming from her, and at the same time, yeah, there is something where I can totally relate to what you're saying. I'd like to go to some of the questions, because we've had a number of questions from people who knew I was interviewing you today. And I want to try and keep it. I've had a number of questions that aren't relationship based, but because of the podcast, I'm going to try and keep them around relationships. And we've got a chap from Norway who's asked, Hogne, who's asked, what are the 3 things he wish everyone would know? But I wonder if you could maybe change the question and say, what would you like anyone listening to this to know about relationships?
Boy, I'll answer, and I'm going to put a great big disclaimer, which is that if you ask me again in an hour, I don't know if my answer would be the same. But here's what comes to mind. One is that whether it's true or not, I love knowing that enjoying each other's company is a legitimate basis for relationship. Like, to me, that was the first thing I saw, and that stuck. That takes so much of the pressure off. That makes it so easy to remember why I'm there. And if I'm not enjoying your company, then that's the problem. Not compatibility, not fundamental values, it's like, if we're enjoying each other's company, we can enjoy each other's company. We can enjoy each other's company regardless. I think the second thing would be to know that your feelings do not come from your partner. That's way huger. I don't know if huger is a word, but that's way huger than it sounds. That the love does not come from them, though it can be massively amplified when you are in love with them, when you are both in that state of love together. And that the bad feelings don't come from them either, because it lets them be them and you be you. You know, we had one of the readings at our wedding, which is quite a common marriage reading, is from Khalil Gibran, about the two trees growing up, and the roots are separate, but the branches intertwine. And I still love that as an image, that, you know, we have grown together as one, and yet our roots are in the same soil but separate. You know, we share a fundamental birthright, but we are separate individuals. And knowing that my feeling isn't coming from my partner lets them feel what they feel and me feel what I feel, and makes that not a problem. So that would be probably the second thing, and that's huge. That's incalculable. And I kind of don't want to add a third one, because honestly, like, if you get where your feelings are coming from and you enjoy each other's company, you're going to do great. And I think there's already way too much thinking about it. And I don't really think anything good comes from having more to think about.
So at the risk of asking a question with maybe a very similar answer, because I want to just get one more in from one of the many questions we've had. We've got one a little bit more specific. It's around, I believe, compatibility. And we've got Scott who's asked the question around boredom, and specifically saying that if one partner is fun loving and loves life and very outgoing, and the other partner is a bit of the opposite, they get on with each other, they love each other, but still the fun loving partner sometimes feels a bit bored. What can they do about that?
Well, so the problem is in the question. Okay. Once you start to see somebody as fixed, oh, they are shy, they are this, they are a good person, they are a bad person, they are emotional, they are intellectual, you stop seeing the person, and you now see the icon that you helped create. So anytime they don't behave in line with what you made up they are, you miss it, or you excuse it, or you explain it away. And every time they do, you reinforce it. So you're not living with your partner anymore. You're living with what you've made up about them. And they will tend to act into that, right? There's an element of self-fulfilling prophecy to it. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. So the first thing I would do is throw out the idea that your partner is fun-loving or serious. And you'll start to see, oh, no, sometimes they're this and sometimes they're that. And yeah, if I made tick marks, maybe I'd tick this side more than that side for a little while, but they're human beings. The second thing would be to see that boredom is a state of mind. Boredom doesn't come from a situation. Boredom is, in fact, when my head is going faster than life. So I've got so much thinking going on that life seems slow. Well, when my thinking slows down, life suddenly is going just the right speed, and it's fascinating again. So like with our kids, we used to do this thing we called unplug time when they were younger. So they couldn't be on a computer or a phone or a device between 10 and 4 in the summer and during on weekends. And the first hour was the testing ground. If we could survive as parents the first hour of our kids being bored and miserable and pains in the ass, those days turned out to be the best days because they would go out and play. We would all go out as a family. We'd read, we'd talk, we'd play, we'd have amazing days. Those days where we bought into the boredom and thought, oh yeah, no, we don't want them to be bored. Then nothing happened. And so if you start buying into boredom as meaningful and indicative of anything other than the fact that you're thinking too much, and when your thinking slows down, you won't be bored, then actually you're going to find the best conversations and the best dates and the best experiences you have will come on the far side of boredom.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful answer, and again, resonate with so many things you said, and I can remember when I used to be very bored, and I love the way you said that it's when your thinking's going faster than life is. And on the flip side, when you slow down, just how much more you appreciate your life and your relationships. I can't believe we've hit time. I can't believe we've got to the end of this interview already. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you have. I know you've got a ton of resources. If people want to find out more about you, if they want to get in contact or they want to see what you're up to, what's the best way that they can do that?
Well, quite excitedly, we've just launched our new website at michaelneill.org. So you can literally find everything from the new books to the old books to, we have tons of videos. We're always putting out, I'm an incessant writer. So, people sign up to the weekly Caffeine for the Soul blog. You won't get bored.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. And I got to say, I love everything that you put out. Your Inside Out Revolution is a book that I buy many times for people. I love sharing your TEDx talk, and I'm looking forward to reading your new book myself too. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for listening to the Relationship Series podcast. If you want to hear more, you can click the subscribe button below. You can share this and impact someone else who can benefit, or you can like it and encourage others to listen. Also, it'd be great if you leave me a comment below, as I always love hearing from listeners, and I want to keep creating great content for you. Thanks for listening.